Hello my lovelies and welcome to the Spirit Tarot YouTube channel. If you are new, welcome back. If you were a returning viewer, I'm Rin and today's video is on budget-friendly witchcraft. Now I was inspired to do this video by Mixtress Ray, and I'll try to link the video that she did down below. She did a video about income inequality in tarot. And so I will be talking a little bit about tarot, but I was like, you know what, I want to do budget-friendly witchcraft altogether, not just tarot, because I think that there's always a need for this, but right now, as I'm recording this in our current economy, I think that we need it even more so than usual. This is a topic I've actually talked about before because it's near and dear to my heart. When I started down my path, when I first came into paganism and the craft, I was a broke college student. And so I had to figure out ways to do things on a budget. And I was a broke college student in the 90s. And if any of you are 90s witches as well, you know, when we bought books in the 90s, first of all, we had, well, if you were a broke college student like me, I had to save up just to buy a book on paganism and the craft. But then the books always wanted you to have these expensive items in order to be able to practice. And a lot of the herbs and supplies that they called for were not things that were local to me. They were not things that I could get. They would have to have been special ordered. It would have been very cost prohibitive. And so I had to find a way to make my practice friendly to my budget. And even now that I have adult money, I am very conscious of how much I spend and is an item really worth it? Because the truth of the matter is you don't need the stuff, right? Paganism, if you are following the pagan path, witchcraft, if you practice the craft, all of that is within you. You don't need the external things. They're not requirements, but and this is the rub of it too. A lot of times, especially if you're getting into the craft when you are young, most of the time you have less disposable income at that age. Or if you're just having a hard time in this economy and you're just coming into the craft, it can be very hard to purchase all of the things you think you need. The rub of it, as I said, is this. When you are new to the craft, right, the tools help you work your craft. They are an aid. And for some of us, when we come into the craft, that aid, that physical, tangible, touchable thing really helps us to be able to tap into that energy, that magic, that power within us. But a lot of the fancy things are not accessible. And just because, you know, it isn't accessible doesn't mean that you can't practice powerful, transformative things without all of the expensive tools. So I wanted to do a video where I go over a lot of the different ways that I have found to keep my practice budget friendly. Like I said, even though I have adult money now, I still use a lot of these practices, as you will see, because I am going to show you things from my own personal practice that I do and use to keep the craft budget friendly for me. Now, I'm going to try to break this into chapters. So if there's an area that you want to come back to or review for inspiration, that you can easily find what it is you're looking for, because I have a feeling this video is going to be on the longer side because I'm probably going to talk a lot since this is something I have been doing for over 20 years now, and I have a lot of things to show you and talk about. So this is probably going to be a bit of a rambly video because I'm going to probably talk a lot about these topics. But like I said, I'm going to try to break this into chapters. That way, if you're particularly into something, you can jump ahead to that. Or if you want to come back to this for reference, then you can easily get to the spot that you want. So I am going to try to break this into chapters for you. We're going to start out with just some basic ideas of overall of keeping witchcraft budget friendly, and I'm going to go through several different topics, and like I said, I will talk about tarot budget friendly options for you. That'll be the last topic that I cover, so that'll be the last chapter in this video. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So these are sort of my rules, if you will, for budget witchcraft. They are not anything that you need to adhere to in any sort of strict sense. These are just sort of my rules, my guidelines I personally use for being budget friendly. But guideline number one, if you will, is to use what you already have around you. So look for things that you can repurpose and reuse, such as jars. I love the jars that tomato sauce comes in, the glass jars. This I use for spell jars quite frequently. This was a candle at one point in time. I kept the jar and I repurpose it to use for spell jars. Whenever that spell has run its course, I dispose of the contents however is appropriate for that spell. And then I give it a good cleaning and it's ready for the next time that I need a jar for a spell jar. These spice jars are great when you've finished using your spice. You can see this was a garlic powder jar. It now holds my black salt, or some people call it witch's salt. This was a lip scrub. When I finished the lip scrub, it now houses jump rings that I used for attaching charms to my tarot bags, and I didn't have a good place for them, so that's where they went. This little bag here, I don't remember what I got in it, but something I got came in this. And so then I had some dried rose petals and a little piece of rose quartz, and I just made a little self-love sachet out of that, a little spell bag to have around. So anything that you have around that you already have, if you need an herb for a spell, well then if you grow your own, use whatever you have. If you don't have access to something, buy something that you can easily get locally. I recommend, especially if you're on a budget, sticking to herbs that are used for cooking. Pretty much any purpose you might need an herb for, there is a cooking herb that will do that task. Do people have preferences on what herbs to use for what spells? Absolutely. Are there some people that are like, oh my gosh, you have to use this herb because it is the most powerful herb for this purpose? Absolutely. And you know, I'm not here to say that they're wrong or right, but the thing is, if you don't have, like if you just don't have access to a blue lotus, or you would have to pay an arm and a leg to get a blue lotus to use for a spell, in my personal opinion and practice, don't come for me, that's ridiculous. Google is your friend, right? So if you find a spell that you want to do and it calls for things that you don't have access to, use Google to find out what other herbs or stones or crystals match that intention, and then use those. I always say use what you have within your house first, and then start figuring out what you need to purchase or what you need to, because the next chapter will be on wildcrafting, or go wildcrafting for it. But don't spend a fortune on things. Use what you have around your house first. I mean, for one thing, this is economical. For another thing, it's good for the environment too. I could just throw this away, or I could keep it and use it for spell jars for the next 30 years. So, you know, repurpose things that you have. Like I said, this came with something else. This was a candle holder. This was a spice jar. Do whatever you can. This right here is the deck that I used to learn a vintage French Cartomancy system. This was a deck that somebody discarded, and it was given to me because the woman who did the cleaning of the empty units knew that I read cards and then I collected cards, and she brought me this deck, and she was like, I don't even know if all the cards are here, but do you want it? And I was like, sure. And then my husband was kind of interested in it because the backs of them, he collects playing cards, and this is a backing that he was looking for. But all 52 cards weren't here. So he was like, well, you wanted to use a deck to write on for your learning deck for that French Cartomancy. He's like, why don't you see if the cards you need are there? And lo and behold, all the cards I needed for this system, because it doesn't use a full 52 card deck, were here. And so this discarded deck became my learning deck. So I spent nothing to learn that system of Cartomancy, because I just used what I had around. So my first guideline is to make full use of whatever you have lying around your house. When you use up something, think about whether or not that container has a secondary purpose that you could use it for within your craft. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is wildcrafting, which I kind of already mentioned. So I'm going to put a new chapter here, and then we'll talk about wildcrafting. My wildcrafting projects tend to be things that are not easy for me to show on camera with my setup. So I did get this because what you can do is you can go out and I find a lot of rocks, driftwood, things like that. But in this particular case, I had wanted a house plant, but this was when we had just moved to the Pacific Northwest, and I did not have extra money in the budget at that time for houseplants because I wasn't able to bring any houseplants with us from back east. And so after we got here, I had no houseplants, and I really wanted a houseplant. And so I put that intention out to the universe, and lo and behold, there are places here where these hens and chicks grow kind of like weeds. And I found some discarded hens and chicks on the sidewalk. I picked them up, brought them home. At that particular time, like I said, money was real tight because we had just driven cross country to move from the East Coast to the West Coast. So I picked up some rocks, some gravel that I found along the road. At that time, what I had was, how I like to reuse what I have. I like the wee yogurt, and I had a couple wee yogurt jars. So I picked up some gravel, put gravel in the bottom of the wee yogurt jar. I just found some dirt from, a place that side of the road where nobody would notice that I was digging dirt. So I just got some dirt, I got some gravel, I had that wee jar, and I planted these in that to begin with. The windowsill that I have where we are now is very shallow, so I can't put any big pots on it. So I just got a cheap mug at the store and repotted them into the cheap mug, and I do have good potting soil in there for them now. But when I started off, I wanted houseplants because that's very important to me. That's part of sort of my vibe and my energy as a witch, is having, plants in the house. And so that's what I did. I wildcrafted. I went out, found them in the wild, harvested them, so to speak, from the wilds of the sidewalk, and grew them. But I have, shells and stones and sticks, depending on where it is and what it is. Sometimes you can be out and dig up plants or that you need for specimens. Sometimes you can join groups where you can exchange things. I have this plant that needs separated, willing to trade for, this plant. If you have some extra you can spare, you can do things like that too. One of the things I like to do, I don't have any herbs right now. In the winter, it's not, the window that I have just will not support the growth of herbs. But we're getting into spring. Here on the West Coast, or at least where I am in the Pacific Northwest, we have a grocery chain called Grocery Outlet, which if you're from the East, I grew up with Aldi. So I was familiar with Aldi. Grocery Outlet is kind of like the Pacific Northwest version of that. And they often will sell like herbs in the spring. You can get them super cheap. Google some how-tos. Basil in particular is really easy to propagate. And so if you get one basil plant, you can turn that into 5 basil plants relatively easily if you have a green thumb. Another thing that I like to do is kitchen scraps, regrowing those. I don't have I usually grow scallions like that. I usually have a thing of scallions in my window. You cut off the tops, the green part, leave the white part with the root alone. You're going to put that white part with the root in a jar. Again, those wee jars, all of mine are full, or I would show you what a wee yogurt jar looks like. But they are great for this. I put the scallions in there with some water, put them in my windowsill, and it will regrow the greens on top. And then I use that in my cooking. I can also use that in my magic. And you can get about 3 regrowths out of a batch of scallions, and then you need to just toss them out and start over. But you can get the initial from when you buy it, and then I usually get about 3 regrowths out of them. You just clip them off. Down, you want to leave a little bit of the green, but down towards the white is where you clip them off, where you can see where they've sprouted out into 2 or 3 or what have you. That's where you want to clip, and then you can regrow that. I've also done kitchen scrap celery. I'm trying to think what else I have done. I've done a few other things. If you like sweet potato vine, you can just let a sweet potato from the grocery store sprout. The little sprouts on them, and then plant that. You'll get sweet potato vine. You can use the pits out of the avocados to grow a little avocado tree. There's lots of ways that you can, if you need greenery in your space, because that's part of what helps to nourish your soul and give you energy. There's lots of ways that you can do that out of kitchen scraps so that you don't have to go out and buy a ridiculously expensive houseplant, because let's face it, some places, like here, it's not uncommon for a houseplant to sell for $50 or $60, which, no, that's not my budget. Kitchen scrap houseplants are, pineapple is another good one that you can grow from scraps in your house too. So to me, those fall under the category of wildcrafting. I know that technically wildcrafting is more going out into the wild, gathering supplies, and then doing something with it. But my first wand when I was coming into the craft was a stick that I went out into the wild and found and processed. And that's what I had for a wand. So you can, if you're willing to get creative, if you're willing to go out into nature, you can find a lot. And like I said, kitchen scraps too. Kitchen scraps can be an invaluable tool. The next resource that I want to talk about is dollar stores and thrift stores. We're also going to talk a little bit more about repurposing as we talk about this. But dollar stores and thrift stores can be a great place. If you don't, because, McCormick seasonings can be a little on the pricey side sometimes. If you need to and or want to, depending on what your budget is and what you want to prioritize as to what you're going to spend more money on and what you need to save money on. If you need to get herbs for your cooking and your witchcraft, the dollar store can be a great place to pick up herbs at a far more reasonable price. I pick up a lot of containers for things at dollar stores. So this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. This box here came from a dollar store. Let's move this here. So inside, this is what I call my charm box. I have this velvet bag that I don't remember what it came with. Came with something else. Any bag that I have, for the most part, unless it's a tarot bag, something came in it, and then I've just kept it and reused it. But this has my charm set in it that I use for my Lenormand style charm readings. And then talking about repurposing, this, I needed a charm, a seeker charm. And so this little flip-flop, this was a necklace that I had. The chain had broken and I wasn't wearing it. And so I decided that was going to be my seeker charm because, you know, a person's foot, the direction we're going in, worked for me. Then I was at the dollar store and they had these little glass decorative things. They're flat on one side. They're almost like a marble, but they're flat on one side. And I wanted more. So this seeker charm can just represent anybody. But I wanted seeker charms that were specific to someone's zodiac sign. So what I did was I got these little glass beads, we'll call them, at the dollar store. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. But I got these at the dollar store. I took a Sharpie that I already had, and on the back of them, and you have to do it backwards, so that's a little tricky. But I drew the symbols for the zodiac signs onto the back of them, and that created 12 seeker charms, one for each of the zodiac signs. So dollar store craft project helped me fill out that. And if you've ever priced zodiac charms, they are not cheap. I do have some zodiac charms. And when I mentioned discount chains like Grocery Outlet or Aldi, this aloe plant that I got right here, this came from our local grocery outlet. It was, I think, under $5. So definitely an affordable option if you're looking for some plants. If you're looking for flowers to use on your altar or as offerings, places like Grocery Outlet and Aldi are a great choice for that as well. So the charm casting was all from the dollar store. Some other dollar store items I got, both of these candles. So I got these at the Dollar Tree. They were $1.25 each, and then I have the battery operated tea light candles in them. 2 of those tea light candles for $1.25. It is much more cost effective for me personally to use the battery operated candles when possible, as opposed to the tea lights. So I have started that for anything like this where I'm using them for lighting, or even like if I wanted to light a candle to my ancestors, and it's just like the daily thing, whatever, it's just the run of the mill. I honestly will use a battery operated tea light now to save money and save on resources. I will use, because I do a lot of candle magic, so I save my tea light candles, the real deal candles, now for spell work. Or if I'm doing some sort of big offering or important offering for my ancestors, then I'll break out the real candles. But otherwise, I'm using these battery operated tea lights because it is just so much more cost effective than using the real deal. So those came from the Dollar Tree also. I just got these yesterday. So if you're watching this close to when I'm recording it and posting it, spring 2023, I think I put too many 20s in there. Spring 2023 is when I got these at my Dollar Tree. Another thing that I got that I repurposed, I wanted to show you and I forgot this, but this bag came with my Tea Leaf Fortune Cards Oracle that I have. And so this is my other charm set. This is where the little one I showed you, I have a Lenormand system that I read with, and this is just my big charm bag for when I'm just drawing charms to do some other styles of reading. And you guys know I showed this basket in another video. I got this for $5 at Target. So watch for deals at Target. I don't encourage you going into Target just for the sake of going into Target, because it seems like that place has its own magic where it makes us spend money we're not intending to, and that kind of defeats the purpose of this video. But sometimes you can find good deals there as well. Now, thrift stores are another great place, and we can talk sometime about which thrift stores are good and ethical and which aren't. That can be a whole video of its own, but One of the big things that, especially beginner witches, but even us seasoned witches, I love journals and notebooks. I like to have stuff to write my thoughts and ideas in. I like to have ones to write important notes in. My Book of Shadows is more or less on my laptop, which if you already have a computer, then keeping a digital one is fine. Journals can be very expensive. These are 2 tarot journals that I have, and I got these at a thrift store. I think this one had a page or 2 written in. I just pulled it out and then made that into my tarot journal. This one, I don't believe this one had anything in it. It was completely blank, found it at the thrift store. You can also find journals at the dollar store. Again, I didn't want to put it in this because I only have so much space, only so much real estate in the frame. But I wanted to dive heavy duty back into my manifestation practice, right? Because this happens to all of us from time to time. We get into a practice, but then we get distracted with something else. And so a practice that we were doing very diligently, we kind of get away from it a little while. And I haven't been doing all of the things that I know I should do and want to do when it comes to my personal manifestation practice. And I did not want to go spend $20 or so on a journal for that. So I got just a Mead lined tablet. I had some stickers from a friend that I decorated it with, and that is now my manifestation manual / journal. And I don't remember, I actually sent my husband to the store for the tablet, but usually around $10 for a college ruled Mead tablet. And that'll last for quite a while. And it has the 3 holes in it, so down the road, if I decide I could pick up an inexpensive binder, maybe at the thrift store, because they do generally have some binders and things like that at thrift stores. At least mine locally do. So if I want to, if I decide at some point that I don't want to keep it in the tablet itself as it is, then I can always either put the whole tablet or the individual pages into a binder later on down the road that, again, dollar store, thrift store, something like that, you can find them. Thrift store is great too if you don't have, I say use what's in your house first, but if you don't have a cup, if you're doing cakes and ale with your rituals, if you don't have a cup that you can dedicate as your ceremonial cup, or if you don't have a bowl that you can dedicate for use on your altar, if you don't already have something in your possession that you could use for that, thrift stores and dollar stores are great places to go look for that. If you're leaving offerings for the ancestors, your ancestors are not going to be offended if you leave the offering for them on a plate that came from a thrift store or a dollar store. They're fine with that. And on that note, because I do work with ancestors and I do teach working with ancestors, if you're on a budget, and you're leaving offerings for your ancestors, just take, a couple noodles or whatever out of whatever it is you are eating and offer it to them as your offering. So you don't have to leave anything expensive or lavish. In fact, the way I was taught and the way that I practice, I only leave expensive or lavish offerings for my ancestors if I have petitioned their help in something quite big and monumental and they have come through for me. Then I will break out a significant, pricey, lavish offering on that rare occasion. But just for your regular routine offerings, just a little bit of whatever you're eating is good. Whatever cookies you got at the dollar store are good. As long as don't offer the ancestors anything you wouldn't eat yourself, but as long as you are willing to eat it, it doesn't matter what you paid for it. You can share that with your ancestors as an offering. So, if you're at the Dollar Tree getting your snacks, right, and you want to leave a little offering for your ancestors, well, if you got yourself a little bag of gummy bears, leave a gummy bear for your ancestors. Chances are they did not have the delight of gummy bears in their life when they were on this plane, and they will greatly enjoy that little treat. So don't worry about the cost of what you are offering your ancestors. Just offer them something that you yourself would partake of or are partaking of. So that doesn't have to be super expensive or lavish either. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is when you are trying to stick to a budget. You can get affordable candles because a lot of spells require candles or call for candles. And I personally like to do a lot of candle magic. If you cannot afford good quality candles, it is okay to get your candles at the dollar store. I don't really recommend getting them from the thrift store. You can, like, if you see a candle that clearly has never been burned at all whatsoever, then you could go ahead and get your candle from the thrift store. But I would not pick up anything that has already been burned to any extent, because you don't know what it was used for. You don't know if it was just burned as just a candle or if it was used in spell work. Because I am not the only witch that gets items from the thrift store and donates items to the thrift store. Now, I would never donate to the thrift store anything I have used in spell work personally, but that doesn't mean that other people wouldn't. So if you were going to buy a candle from the thrift store for a magical purpose, even to use on your altar, I would only do so if it has clearly never been lit. But the dollar store, listen, if that's your price range for candles, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, I know they're not as of good quality. They don't burn as long. They don't burn as well. The chemicals in that they give off are not exactly healthy. I know, believe me, if we all could, we'd all be using beeswax or soy candles and, but those things are expensive. So if you need to, go ahead and grab those at the dollar store. But moving on to this topic now, if you are wanting to do a working, right, but you don't have the money for extra ingredients for a spell, or you don't have, there are times where we have to prioritize and you can't even afford the $1.25 candle at the dollar store to do your candle magic. Sometimes, even if we want to do a spell a certain way or a certain type of spell, sometimes when we are being budget conscious or when our means are limited, we have to be able to switch gears and look for a more accessible way. And so one of the things that I personally recommend is, if you don't have the money to throw at supplies for a spell, especially, if you're down and out, what you want to do is a prosperity spell, right? And you don't want to have to spend a fortune on the components for a prosperity spell when the whole reason you're doing the prosperity spell is because you're pinching pennies. It just kind of, doesn't work well. So the thing is, you still have to eat every day, right? So whether you are into kitchen witchery or not, if you're on a budget and you can't afford to do whatever form of magic you really prefer to do, you've got to eat anyhow. So look at what foods you can afford, what their magical correspondences are, and then figure out which of your meals are good for what purpose. Something with rice, because rice is good for abundance, right? So something with rice would be a great meal to turn into a prosperity spell. If you happen to have some mint tea on hand, right, and you happen to own a tarot deck already, carefully, and I emphasize that, make sure the bottom of your cup is dry. Make sure you're not going to damage your card in any way. You want to make sure that you're not going to spill the tea, right? But make yourself a cup of peppermint tea. And while it's steeping, let that cup of steeping peppermint tea sit on an Ace of Pentacles card from your tarot deck to attract abundance and prosperity. Really simple spell. If you already have peppermint tea on hand, great. If you already have a tarot deck on hand, great. Guess what? Maybe you don't have a tarot deck yet. We're going to talk about, tarot decks on a budget in a minute. But but you at least have the peppermint tea, right? Well, sugar, guess what? Sugar sweetens things. It attracts abundance and prosperity. So, put a little sugar in your peppermint tea and stir that clockwise to bring that money and sweeten your financial situation, right? You want to stir it clockwise and then drink that, channel your intent into it, channel that purpose into it, and then bring that into yourself. Make yourself an attractor for money and to sweeten your financial situation by drinking that peppermint tea. So, there are ways that you can do that. Also, even just if your food doesn't necessarily align with a specific magical purpose, just blessing your food, be that through just saying a little prayer over it, or if you are an energy worker, doing some kind of energy work. I am a Reiki practitioner, so I will sort of bless my food with Reiki, even my morning coffee, give it a little Reiki before I drink it. Those are ways that you can imbue your foods with purpose and magical intent and positive energy, healing energy, whatever you want to do. Like if you're a Reiki or you're an energy worker, honest to goodness, I mean, it's very, a chaos magic idea. And there are people that will say, no, 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 you have to, coffee is for this purpose and that's what you have to use it for. But your chaos witches and others of us will be like, you know what? I ingest coffee every morning. I'm going to use Reiki energy to imbue that to bring me abundance. I'm going to use that to imbue it with, energies of healing. I'm going to imbue it with energies of love. Whatever your intention or purpose is, you can do that. As long as you believe that it will work for you, then it will work for you. So whether you are into kitchen witchery or not, if you are on a budget, I highly recommend that you at least look into a few different techniques for turning what you already drink and eat into basically potions that you are ingesting with magical purpose and intent. All right, so this is our last chapter here, and this is going to be on tarot, cartomancy on a budget. Let's face it, I have considered even mass market decks to be on the pricey side for a while. I've noticed in the last couple years, the average price of a mass market deck was $25 to $30. I have noticed in the last few months, I'm seeing more and more that mass market decks are $30 to $35. When I went to do this video beforehand, I wanted to go into my Amazon order history and see what the most affordable mass market tarot deck out there that I personally have is, so that I could recommend a good beginner mass market inexpensive deck to y'all. And let me tell you what, I had sticker shock because the price on some of the decks that I already own has gone up. I know that there's one that I know I did not pay over $25 for it, and it is now $35 on Amazon. And I had noticed that as I looked through my previous orders and looked at what the decks are priced at now, those prices have gone up on decks that even have been out for a while. And so I completely understand when people say, I want to read tarot, but I can't afford a deck. I understand. I really and truly do. So there's a couple different options that you have. If you really want a tarot deck itself, this is the cheapest tarot deck I own. It is the Everyday Witch Tarot. It is the mini version. It is only $12. It is the cheapest tarot deck I have seen that is a good tarot deck. Now, I personally, I don't know if this is going to happen or not. The mini deck for me, I like it, but it doesn't photograph well for my purposes when I'm doing readings for clients because it's too small. So I really want the full-size version of the deck. I don't have it. The problem there being is I wouldn't buy it before because the full-size version was $30. I probably should have bought it then, because if I go and look at it now, I'm going to guess that it may be up to 35 now. And I personally, it has to be something completely amazing for me to spend over $25 on a mass market deck. I'll spend over $25 on an indie deck on the rare occasion that I buy an indie deck. That's a whole other story. My issues with indie decks. But I really don't like to go over $25, maybe 30 if it's something really special. And so I haven't grabbed the Everyday Witch Tarot. Now, because apparently YouTube has basically changed their rules when it comes to tarot, and I can't use a lot of the decks anymore that I would have used previously for pick a card readings on my second channel, I may go ahead and invest in the full size of this, because there are no bits and bobs showing in this deck. It's not a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but it is in the Rider-Waite-Smith system. So if you're new to tarot, this would be an easy enough one to learn this one and be able to apply that to other decks. It's not a one-to-one for the Rider-Waite-Smith or the other Rider-Waite-Smith clones, but I do feel like if you are on a budget and you really want to learn tarot and you really want a tarot deck, this is probably your best budget-friendly option for a beginner. Is this for it's $11.99, I believe, on Amazon. Now, I do also have the Zombie Tarot. I didn't grab it. I think I paid around $15 or $16 for the Zombie Tarot at a Barnes & Noble when I got it years ago. It's also in the Rider-Waite-Smith system, but that's kind of, if you don't like the macabre, that might not be a great deck for everyone, but this will appeal to a wider audience, and it's even cheaper. So I wanted to show you this one. I don't believe that I have a flip through of this deck on my channel because of it being smaller, and it is harder to video and photograph because of it being small. But I will either, if I purchase the full-size version, I'll do a flip through of it, or if I don't think I'm going to purchase the full-size version, then I'll do a flip through of the mini. But the mini, if you are looking for something budget-friendly, is your best option. It is a really nice deck. I do really love the deck. I just don't love the size. But when you're operating on a budget, sometimes we can't always have things exactly as we want. We kind of have to make do. And this is sort of a step up from making do, because it really is a nice deck. The size is a little bit of an issue for me. But it may not be for you. So this is a great option for a tarot deck. I wanted to give you a great option for an oracle deck. Now, there's all different kinds of oracle decks. When we say oracle deck, there's not just one thing, right? Most of the oracle decks I have are pricey. I don't have any of what I consider the traditional oracle deck, what we think of usually when we say oracle decks. I don't have any of those that I would consider budget friendly. So I didn't include any of those. But this Crystal Ball Pocket Oracle, again, it's not like a lot of them that you'll see that they have some sort of message. This is more for answering yes/no questions. And I showed this in the same video that I showed this basket in, because I did sort of a budget-friendly haul. But you ask a yes/no question, and then you get like not the right time, listen to your intuition, get more information, let it go, a sign, the answer no, yes is in here, things like that. So that could be this is only $10 US. So this could be a great option. And honestly, this is how Mixtress Ray's video got started, was the price of decks, and how decks at this point, they've always been, when I was young and newer in tarot and the craft and everything, the budget that I had back then, there were a lot of mass market decks that were out of my price range. But I think things have gotten really crazy lately, and I think that more mass market decks are out of the average person's price range at this particular moment in time, given what is going on in our economy and things. So I just wanted to show you two options that are on the more affordable side. They may not necessarily be your dream tarot deck or your dream oracle deck. This doesn't work like I use a lot of different oracle decks. It doesn't work like my Heavenly Bodies oracle or my Moonology oracle or Into the Lonely Woods or oracle decks like that. But those were all pricier decks. This is $10. So, honestly, truly, if you're starting out or maybe you're starting over and you need to get budget-friendly decks, these two are extremely budget-friendly. Another option you have, if you don't like this mini tarot, is to just get a deck of playing cards. And I do have a tutorial. I'll try to remember to link it in the description box. But I have a tutorial of how you can read playing cards as tarot cards. Now, it is not exactly the same because obviously you don't have the majors and you don't have the full set of court cards, but it can be done. You equate the playing cards to certain tarot cards, and then you just use whatever spreads you would use for the most part. You use whatever spread you would use with tarot with the playing cards and just read the playing cards as tarot cards. Now, there are certain spreads that I do where you have to separate out the majors and the court cards and the minors, and then you use each of those for a different part of the spread you're doing. Obviously, I can't do that with a deck of playing cards, but for your average everyday readings, you can use a deck of playing cards, or you can there are many systems for reading playing cards. So if you feel that, tarot is just, even getting this deck is out of your budget at the moment, and believe me, there is no shame in that. We have all been there, or at least most of us have been there. If this is even out of your price range at the moment, that's okay. If you happen to have a deck of playing cards laying around, you can either learn to equate them to tarot and start working with them that way, or you can learn one of the systems of playing cards. And I do intend, like I said, this is my French learning deck here, and I do intend, when I have the time, and it's just hard to find the time, but I'm going to do a series here on the Spirit Tarot YouTube channel where I teach that particular system. So, there are systems out there just for reading playing cards. There are YouTube channels and websites where you can learn those methods for free, or at least get enough information for you to start reading, and then you can develop your own practice from there. You can, sort of develop your own minutia and little bits that maybe aren't clear or aren't included in the free instruction. But you can do that too. That is another way that you can get into cartomancy with very little investment, because you can pick up a regular standard deck of playing cards. Usually they'll have them at the dollar store. They can get pricey too, believe me. I have some because I like to read with playing cards. I have some playing card decks that I have paid, $15 to $20 for, because they were a special deck that I really wanted that theme to them. But just a standard deck of playing cards you can pick up for under $10, and there's no reason that you can't read with those. Again, it may not be your preference. I have seen people, when I teach how to read playing cards like tarot cards, I have seen people snub their nose at it and me because, well, it doesn't include the majors and it doesn't have all of the court cards. I know. I get it. There's 52 cards in a playing card deck, and there's 78 in a tarot deck. Obviously, it's not all the same. But if you step back and think about it like this, and you're realistic about what your intent and purpose is, right? So the major arcana, if you're not familiar with this, the major arcana is about the big things, the archetypes, the big events in life, right? The really huge energies and happenings. Whereas the minors are about the minutia. They're about the day-to-day events and happenings and energies and occurrences and people. So If you're wanting to read on something that is very major arcana weighted and heavy in the sense of it's got a lot of gravity to the situation and that, then no, you might not want to use playing cards for that. But for your average day-to-day reading, playing cards are just fine. For that average everyday stuff, playing cards are great. Like I said, I'll try to remember to link the tutorial on how to read playing cards like tarot cards in the description box. I also have another video that shows you how to do yes/no readings with playing cards. And there's the Four Kings method, which is another yes/no method basically, but it's most often used to tell if somebody loves you or not and things like that. So there's a lot of different options there. You might have to start out with something that maybe is not your dream Cartomancy system or your dream deck, but you can get started on a budget. And that's what this is all about, is about practicing on a budget, whether we need to or want to. Like I said, I have personally, I have my priority. There are certain things that I will spend a pretty penny on. And then there are things that I'm like, no, I will not go and buy a bunch of fancy expensive jars because I will repurpose what I have and use those. Even the fancy, if you want to call them that, jars that I have in my jar collection are ones that I picked up inexpensively at like Target and the dollar store and things like that. At the thrift store. My candle holders are all, well, I guess you would count these as brand new, but I got them at the Dollar Tree for $1.25. The rest of my candle holders all came from the thrift store. But you really can practice witchcraft on a budget, and I hope that this video has given you some ideas as to how you can make your practice more affordable and accessible to you. So if you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps. Please subscribe to the channel because that helps out so much. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Don't forget that I do offer one-to-one mentorships in witchcraft, paganism, divination, all that. You can find that all on my website. Again, that'll be linked below. So if you have the budget for some one-on-one, I don't require you to sign up for any certain number of classes or sessions with me. It's basically pay as you go. That's how I do it. You want a mentorship on this or that, you pay for that mentorship, get that, and then when you're ready and or can budget for another class, that's when we go from there. So I do try to keep that as budget friendly as I can. So until I see you again, thank you for being here and blessings to you wherever your journey finds you.